In this episode of J Ray's DIY, I'm going to be attempting to make a walnut desk for my daughter, and this should closely resemble actual woodworking. But before I make this desk, why don't you go ahead and take a moment and hit that like button. So these boards that I've got in front of me have already been milled down. I've run them through the joiner and the planer and repped the opposite edge off on the table saw. I've also already gone ahead and used my biscuit cutter and cut holes in these for biscuits. So the next step we're going to do is glue them up. Hopefully we'll get a nice flat panel glue up. Now that we got the desktop squared up on the ends, it's cut, I need to cut some boards for the legs, and I'm going to do that by cutting them a little bit long because we're going to have to shape these boards as well as mill them down. So I'm going to cut them at 35 inches. We want the overall height of the desktop to end up at 34, which would mean we want around 33 and a quarter because the desktop is about 3/4 of an inch thick. Okay, so the last board was a little bit wider than the other three that I cut, but that's okay. I'm just using the boards that I've got, and these will all be cut down to the same size here in a minute. Well, I'm sure I'm the only one that has this problem. The project takes a little bit longer than what it should because when you decide to do something a little bit different than what you normally do, you end up having to make a jig in order to make the part that you want to make and have it look the way that you want it to look. And the way that I designed this jig was I made it to where it would fit over my fence on my table saw. It's kind of cool because not only will it work as a taper jig, but I can take it off and turn it around, and I can use it as an extended fence if I need to. Just like that. Now I've got an extended fence that I can use as well. So the way I'm using this taper jig is I'll run my fence up to where the edge of this jig is right next to the saw blade, and then I'll put my piece on here and clamp it in place where I want it. I put a mark on the top and the bottom side, so on this end and on that end of the jig where I wanted the top of my board to be wider and the bottom of my board to be a little narrower. I lined up the edge of that board, the little tip right here, with my line on both sides, clamped it down, and then double checked just to make sure that it was still in place right where I wanted it to be. So I've got my miter saw set to 10 degrees. I want to try to use that for the top end and the bottom end of the legs here so that they'll have a little bit of bevel to them, give it a modern look. And I'm going to cut all 4 legs, just the top side of them, and then I'm going to measure to see where I need to cut the bottom side of these legs. It's important when you're doing this to keep the flat part of these boards against the fence. So what I'm going to do, instead of cutting it from the left side on the saw, I'm going to have to move to the other side of the saw and put the board against the fence here so I can keep that same angle going. I did not move my miter saw angle, so I want to line it up with my mark, and then we'll cut off that end, and then I'm going to use this piece as a template to cut the other 3 pieces, hopefully get them the exact same length. So originally when I was building the concept, or drew the concept for this desk, I was thinking I wanted the legs to go like this on the front and back of the desk so that you would see them when you walk up to the desk or you're behind the desk. But we also want to include a drawer in the middle on the front of this desk So in order to maximize drawer space, I think we're going to end up putting the boards on the side. It'll end up being something more like this. So if you're not familiar with biscuit joinery, this is what's called a biscuit for wood joinery. And it's just a piece of wood that's been pressed and formed, and they've got different sizes. This one is a 20. They've got 15s and 10s as well. They're just different sizes of biscuits. All I've got is a 20, so I'm going to use that. And I'm just going to put one biscuit at each joint. It'll basically go like this, where half the biscuit will be on this side of the joint, half the biscuit will be on the other side of the joint. And you glue it in place, and you put glue between the boards to glue them together. The biscuits don't really make a whole lot of strength on the joint, but what they do is they help you align the pieces while the glue is drying. The glue will make a really strong joint on these boards. So in order to use the biscuit joinery method, it's pretty simple. All you got to do is have a pencil, line up the edges of the pieces where you want them to be, and then once you've got them lined up where you want them to be, just draw a line somewhere around the middle. As long as your mark on both boards is in the same place, it'll work out fine. So I'm just going to do that on all the pieces that I've got here in order to make it line up appropriately. And like I said, this is not an exact science. You just line up the edge of the boards so they're flush here. Put your mark. Once you've got your mark and it's visible on both pieces, go ahead and go to the next piece, line up the edges, and then put your mark on those pieces. So this is the biscuit joiner tool. When you turn it on and pull the trigger, it pushes out that saw blade, and it makes a round groove in the edge of the board, and then you release it, retracts the blade. There's a notch in the center of here. That's the center of the cut. We're going to line that notch up with the marks that we made on the boards. So pretty simple to use. You just line that up with your mark, get it on there to where your mark is exactly in the center of that, and then when you're ready, go ahead, pull the trigger, and then push in the tool to make your notch in the board. So I've cut the slots for the biscuits on these, and just so you know, this is what the slots look like. It's just a little groove inside there where this biscuit piece fits in, and when you push it in there, that helps align your two pieces when you glue them up. Alright, now that I've got all the slots cut in these boards for the biscuits to go into, it's time for glue up. I'm going to go ahead and start by putting glue on some of the pieces here and down inside the slot for the biscuits. And any little burrs like that are sticking up, I want to try to knock those off just a little bit so that they won't get in the way of the glue up and push the pieces apart. I've got wax paper underneath these boards here. That way these boards won't end up sticking down to the tabletop. As I mentioned previously, the glue is really what's going to hold these pieces together. I'm going to spread this glue out here a little bit just with my finger. Just make sure that we get a nice even glue surface here. And of course there's glue down in the slot as well, so that'll hold to the biscuit nice and tight. You don't need a lot of clamping pressure on there, just enough to where you start seeing that glue squeeze out. And then you can clean up the glue with water and a rag. You get about 20 minutes of working time with this Titebond 3. I really like using the Titebond 3 for the projects that I work on. Not sponsored by them, at least not yet. But I really enjoy using the Titebond 3 product. I think it is a good quality glue, and I've used it on all of my projects for several years now, including many things like coffee tables, this desk here, cutting boards. I even made my dining room table out of it several years ago. Or, not out of the glue, but I used the glue to make my dining room table. So I got these pieces sit here just kind of like a dry fit so I can see how it's going to look. But now it's time that I actually start putting this together. I'm going to try to use dowels for this project, and I got this doweling jig that I just got from Harbor Freight. It's like 15 bucks that I'm going to try out. It's supposed to be self-centering, so when you clamp it on the board, it'll automatically find the center of the board so you can drill your hole. But I've done some testing, it's a little bit off, so what I might have to do is mark my boards exactly where I want the holes, look down the hole, make sure it's lined up before I drill the hole. I'm going to attempt to drill the other side of this through the face of the board with a Forstner bit. I'm going to try to stop when it gets the top of that bit just below the surface. Don't want to go too far. If I go through the other side, that would cause a problem. So since I don't want to drill into this walnut top, I'm going to put a sacrificial board underneath there for the drilling process. So was able to stop those before going all the way through, so now I'm going to try just kind of a dry fit and see if I can get the dowels in here, see if they line up with this other little board, see what that looks like. And it looks like I didn't drill my holes deep enough, so gotta drill them out again. Okay, so there's a little bit of play in this now. So I'll just have to make sure when I clamp it that I get these face flush right here before the glue dries. Well, mistakes were made. This side turned out pretty good. I can get this pretty flush with clamps and stuff when I glue it up. This side here though, I must have drilled back too far on this piece. So the dowels aren't letting it come forward enough. So I'm going to have to take that off, see if I can plug the holes and drill them a little bit closer to the edge here. I'm going to glue these together in stages. First thing, I'm going to glue these small angle pieces to the boards that they go onto, and then I'll glue the back together. And the top, that's going to be last obviously, but the reason why I'm going to glue this in stages is because I'm going to end up having to drill some holes on the ends of these and put a couple dowels in to line them up whenever they're done. This will be much easier with two people. So I had a problem with this walnut top started bowing. It was kind of bowed up like this. So I sprayed the underneath with a spray bottle of water and then set these weights on there. They've been on there for a couple days. It looks like it's flattening out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and take the weights off and see what it looks like. See if I can sand it and try to finish this top. So it looks like it still might have a slight bow right here, but it's a lot better than it was. So I'm going to try to go ahead and sand this down and see if I can smooth out this top and try to get a finish on it before it does it again. this desktop is not perfect. As you can see right here, there was a knot and a piece of that came out. Not sure how well you can tell. There's a little bit of a crack here. Comes some couple little spots here and here, and another knot on the back. So what I'm going to do to fill these holes is I'm going to take some of the sawdust and some wood glue. I'm going to mix them together on just a scrap board. I'm just using a scrap stick here, and then I'm going to put it in these holes. When it's dry, I'll sand it off, and the holes should be filled in nice. So I noticed there was a little problem with this desktop. Whenever I put the desktop on the desk, a little wobbly. So in order to try to fix this, I'm going to put this brace across the back. I ended up making half lap joints here so that I can put it in like this. But it should strengthen it up quite a bit once we get it pressed together. There's a lot less wobble from side to side. Alright, now that I've run the boards through the joiner and the planer, I've got them to the thickness that I want. I'm going to get them cut to their final width here on the table saw. I'm going to have two different widths though, because I want the drawer to be a little bit narrower than what the face is going to be. And these four pieces are going to include the three sides of the drawer and the face. Do with these boards now that I've got them cut to the width that I want them, or the height that I want them to be. I'm going to look at the grain patterns on them all and see which side of the boards that I like the best on the grain patterns, and the ones that I like the best I'm going to cut off the opposite side so that I can have the grain pattern that I like looking at showing whenever you pull the drawer out. So the kerf on my table saw blade is about a 1/8 inch. I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch plywood for the bottom of this drawer. So I'm going to make two cuts on each board on the table saw. I'm going to make all the cuts the same one time, and then I'll move the fence over just a little bit and make the second cut. So here I'm doing a friction fit test to see if the plywood fits in the groove, and it fits perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and move on and start assembling this drawer and cutting down the 1/4 inch plywood to the size that I need it. I didn't do this on camera, but I put a couple coats of polyurethane on the desk, put it on the drawer, on the legs, and on the top. It's dried for over 24 hours, and so now it's time to go ahead and start putting it together, and I'll show you how I do that right now. So to mount this top to the legs, I decided to go with these tabletop fasteners. They're S-clip. You can tell that by the shape of them. I ordered them off Amazon. It came in a package of 40 of them for about $10. I'm only going to be using about 10 of them on this top here, so I'll have plenty left over for other projects. I figure the cost for this would be between $2.50 to $3 so far. Before I can screw the legs to the top, I want to go ahead and make sure that it's centered left to right and front to back. I made it to where if I center it front to back, that these legs would be within the confines of the desktop itself. So I also want to make note that I'm going to be putting the back of this in place first and bolting it down, and then I'll be probably using a clamp on the front because these have sprung open just a little bit on this front edge, and I want to make sure that I get the reveal on the drawers as close on both sides as possible. So I want the back distance between the two boards and the front distance to be equal. So I'll be doing that by using a clamp on the front before I bolt those down. I'm going to be pre-drilling the holes and then running the bolts in. I'm going to try to be very careful. I don't want to go too deep in the wood. I only want to go about halfway, maybe a little bit less. So only about to here on my drill bit. A good way that you can do this and make sure you get the same depth every time is just put a little bit of tape around your drill bit. I'm also fortunate enough I've got the drill and driver combo, so I've got my Phillips bit on the driver and I've got my pilot bit in my drill. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to use a little bit of electrical tape to mark my drill bit to the depth that I want it. Just right there. Now I'm using a clamp on the front of this. I'm not putting a ton of pressure. I just had to bring these fronts in a little bit so that I can match the back. So I've got 21 3/8 on the back here. And I've tightened up this clamp just enough to where I could match that at the front. Also with 21 3/8 inches. So now that I've got that in place, I can go ahead and pre-drill my other holes to hold the rest of these legs in place. I've got 3 more clamps that I'm putting inside here and 3 more on this side. For this build, I decided to go with full extension drawer slides, and they are also soft close. I've got this one clamped in place where I want it. I've got it from the front edge here back 13/16 of an inch. That should put this 3/16 of an inch from the back of my drawer face. That way I can make the drawer face flush when this is fully closed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pre-drill the holes in here and then put my screws in to hold these on here. I went with just putting them flush at the bottom of the drawer since it's such a shallow drawer. I didn't feel that it was necessary to put it in the middle or anything. I'm just going to make it flush with this bottom board here and go from there. For putting the drawer on here, I've got 2 spacers, one on each side of the drawer that are both the same size. I pulled this out just far enough so I can get this front screw put in here, and then I'm going to do that on both sides and then pull it out to the back slide, have it sitting on the spacer as well, put in the back screw and then put the one in the middle. Well, that's all I've got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really had a good time making this desk, and I believe that it'll last for many years. Of course, we got that soft close feature on the drawer slides there. In total, since I had the walnut wood, this only cost me around $30 to build this desk. But if you had to buy the wood yourself, it'd probably be around $300 to $400, including the wood, the slides, and the tabletop fasteners that you have to put on there. So. And don't forget to stick around if you want to watch the bloopers that were made while building this desk. I think that wobble is just because these legs are so thin, they're about 3/4 of an inch. I lost my mic. I don't know if we got the pieces. Now that we got the tabletop cut, and
And I'm not even recording.
are you recording?
Maybe.
Is this recording or not?
Maybe.
I gotta know so I can do it.
Okay, do it. Go.
Do it. Cut. Boards have also been run through. And as always, stick around if you want to watch some bloopers that were made while building.